Hello, party people.
It is us, your gorgeous ghouls.
And I just got to tell you, Lavender came in to the cast today like she always does. Right under her name, it says hot damn.
It
And
does
I'm
say
going to
hot
tell you, if you go on some of her reels and stuff on Instagram, you're going to look at it and go, wow, hot damn. I know I
Some
do.
days. Some
I
days.
do in the
I mean,
privacy of my.
I think hot damn about our trailer that we're going to play for you guys today.
I was just going to ask you that. You're a mother, and I'm a mother. So,
We are.
what would be more interesting to true crime podcasters who are mothers who like podcasts?
Get together and do a podcast called Like Mother, Like Murder.
Which is exactly what Rachel and Heather do. And we give them 5 stars, 10 stars, 5 skulls, however you want to rate them. They have the greatest chemistry. They have the greatest episodes. They dive in where some people are kind of afraid to dive in, and they're so entertaining. So entertaining. Please listen to their trailer. Go find them on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcasts, and give them a like, give them a share, and tell them that Lav and Stacy sent you their way.
Yep, please do.
Hello, Like Mother, Like Murder listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered,
To survivors and women who empower you.
and of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
I got to give a shout out to my girl Natasha from Cryptids, Creeps, and Conspiracies. She did a contest with if you give her pod 5 star and share it. And then she was doing a contest for T-shirts, and I wasn't being truly serious. I just wanted to boost her because I've talked to her several times, not only on Instagram but through text messages, and she's fascinating. The things that go through her mind and her wicked sense of humor, it is she makes every conversation kind of like you laugh. Every conversation you get into, she makes it fun and makes it not only entertaining, but it's informative as well. So I did this cute little thing about give her 5 stars. This is, check her out, blah blah blah. And I won.
Oh,
I
wow,
won.
really?
I won the T-shirt.
I didn't even
So
remember seeing that. That's how much I don't pay attention on Instagram, I guess. I'm just out here doing whatever.
good. So this is going to come with a big trigger warning. This is not a light case in any way. So if you are, like we always say, if you're offended by things like murder and physical abuse, sexual abuse, if this isn't your jam, catch us on the flip side. We're okay with that. The case that I'm about to bring right now has a twist ending to it. And
We love the surprise endings. She's
this
about to
one,
be M. Night Shyamalan. Is that how you say his name?
Shyamalan.
Shyamalan. M. Night Shyamalan. M.
Well, I
Night
hope my
Stacy.
stuff's. I hope my stuff's a little bit better. I mean, this stuff later is kind of.
He has had a couple of good ones that I enjoyed.
He has. He absolutely has. I will not say he hasn't. The Sixth Sense was absolutely one of my favorite movies. But let's dive in because I know you guys are excited to see what the twist is in this.
Mm-hmm. It's not Sundowner. Sorry to change the subject.
It's not. Yeah, it's not Sundowners. But I think you guys will.
I'm gonna look up a case about Sundowners.
Yes. Let's do that. I haven't heard any podcast that does something about a Sundowner's like true
I'm
crime
sure
case.
there has to be something out there because it's such a they're so aggressive and stuff, and they do such
Well,
bizarre behavior that I'm sure there's something.
there has to be. But we'll find it. Trust me, party people. If it's out there, we'll find it. So, talking about finding, this is a case from the 1990s, and it's not a very well known one. But again, like I said, it has a twist ending. So here we go. In the early hours of May 21st, 1990, the sun had risen over a sleepy agricultural town with a population just over 1,500, revealing what the lead Stanislaus County sheriff called the real nightmare on Elm Street. In a kamikaze style attack, 5 individuals dressed in camouflage outfits entered 5223 Elm Street in Salida, California, just before midnight the night before, leaving a quadruple homicide in their wake. Thank you guys for joining Lav and I as we explore the anatomy of the 1990 Salida cult massacre.
Another cult. We do like these.
I love cults. I love cults. So when you do the anatomy of a crime, if you have, for those who have taken criminology or have had like law enforcement training or just, anything to do with law and to do with crime, and then those of us who do like forensic analysis after post crime or post mortem, what it is you discuss the who, the what, and the why of an incident. And mostly this is used for big incidents to see. Columbine had a very descriptive anatomy of the crime. It's to try to figure out, was there anything that was missed beforehand? Was there anything that could have been done? What was done? And then what the aftermath was. And this is actually one of my favorite ways to go through a case because I have a very curious mind. So I want to know, were there red flags that were missed? Or was it all out there and everybody was just like, that's just, kind of the old, when boys get into trouble, they'll, oh, boys will be boys kind of
Ugh, I hate
feeling,
that.
sentiment. I hate that too, because it's not. It's ridiculous. So that will be what we'll do today in what was the deadliest, still today, the deadliest massacre in Stanislaus County's history. And it all started with a young Gerald Cruz, who, on a search for his identity, developed an appetite for destruction. Born in 1962 to Hortensia Cruz and an absent father, Arsenio Cruz, in Modesto, California, Cruz's life began with a crisis of identity. No one but Hortensia knew why Gerald's father was listed as Lawrence Jimmy Cox. Very different name from who Gerald believed was his father. Hortensia claimed it was because Arsenio was in Mexico and hadn't returned. This would begin a great confusion of who was who in Cruz's familiar roles and the inconsistency and lies that convoluted young Gerald's identity. Everybody can attest to this. When you're young, go back to the earliest thing you can remember. What do you need in your life?
The earliest, like, so are we talking like logically as an adult thinking back, what is the earliest thing you need in your life? Or as a child, what I thought I needed?
Yes. Both. Um, but let's do it like this. Because as kids, I'm sure you like me, I thought I needed everything under the sun and didn't need a damn thing.
Right.
Um,
I thought, like, as a child, I thought like the only thing I needed was like somebody to take care of me, somebody there to provide for me, to give me what I
exactly.
wanted. That's what I thought I needed was as long as somebody was around to give me what I wanted, I was good.
Mhm. Exactly. When you needed that person, even for something as simple as you wanted an ice cream at 5,
Mm-hmm.
how would you have felt to go and not know who to ask, not to truly know, is this my parent? Is this my parent? Who's going to take care of me? Who do I depend on as a child and then as a teenager to be sure my basic needs are met?
I mean, I guess, I guess it would be whoever had provided something for you previously.
Yeah.
I think that's who I would go to. Somebody that had done for me already, done something for me already. That's who I would go to.
And that's actually what Gerald would come to do. Hortensia and her young family lived in Oakdale, California, on a ranch owned by a man named Drummond Sproul. The Cruz family, in exchange for room and board, worked Sproul's ranch. Drummond was quite fond of Gerald and was for quite a long time a father figure for him. So uh, he would go to Drummond, and Drummond treated him as if this was his son. So there was a little piece of security that he had, but unfortunately, that never stays, the same. Things are never the same forever.
Right.
And, you know, and when times change, sometimes, your secure people change too. Hortensia's ex-husband told Gerald that his father wasn't Arsenio or Jimmy Cox, that his father was an abusive drunk, and nobody really knew who it was.
Okay.
So, um, so Gerald confirmed with Hortensia that she was indeed his mother. I imagine the question on all your guys' mind is, why would an adolescent boy ask such an odd question?
Right.
Children commonly question who their fathers are, but very rarely question who their mothers are, because you usually.
That's weird. That's a weird thing to question.
Here's why. Hope Cruz and Marlene Hernandez, Gerald's older sisters, had different information concerning baby Cruz. Hope, who was 21 when Gerald was born, testified in court that Hortensia and Arsenio was Gerald's parents. Marlene, who was 14 at the time, testified that before Gerald had been born, Hope had been away from home for a very long time, only to return with an infant boy she said someone gave her to care for. Marlene went on to say that Hope and Hortensia fought all the time over who would care for baby Gerald.
Okay. So they shared responsibility, I guess?
Partly, but Marlene also came right out and told Gerald Cruz when he was an early teen that his mother was Hope. Hope was not his sister, because she went away for the equivalent of 9 months and then came back with a kid and just had no explanation as to where this kid came from other than someone just gave him to him, told me to raise him. Gerald's physical trauma began at 6 months old when Hope dropped him on a cement porch step. Hortensia told the court that he cried and had a lump on his head, but because the family was below the poverty level, there was no money to take him to a hospital. When Gerald was 4 years old, he was thrown through the front windshield of a speeding car as it slammed on its brakes. And he, of course, was not wearing a seatbelt.
Of course not.
Marlene told the court as well that Gerald was often beaten with sticks, belts, rope, even the electrical cords of different appliances. So here's our nature and nurture.
Right. Exactly.
We don't know by nature what would cause this boy to, have a lot of different, it would turn into a man that would have a lot of different issues and problems and have a destructive nature. But the nurturing is absolutely here. He's dropped at 6 months old, not taken to a hospital.
Right. Exactly. He wasn't in any sort of car seat or anything and ejected out of a car.
Out of the front windshield, was not taken to a hospital. But that wouldn't be the worst of it.
How did he survive this?
I have no idea. I don't think he has any idea.
But he has severe TBI. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, definitely. And it gets worse because his emotional trauma consisted of animal cruelty. Hortensia was a cruel and deceptive woman who tortured things smaller and weaker than herself. She told Gerald that he had magical powers, and he never stopped believing that, even into his adulthood.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into the cruel things that Hortensia did to animals because it disgusts me, and there's no sense in glorifying it. But she did. She liked to torture things, and Gerald was smaller than her at the time.
Wow.
She lied to the senior crews about being married before. She told people all of the children other than Cruz were her nieces and nephews. And she even forbade them from calling her mom. And if one of them slipped and called her mom or said that was her mom, she would immediately jump in and say things like, "Don't lie. Why are you lying? I know your mom is a piece of garbage and you want me to be your mom, but that's not how it is." And she was right on that level. Their mom was a piece of garbage.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
Elementary teachers commented on how bright Gerald was, but expressed frustration that he never applied himself. And due to the nomadic lifestyle Hortensia created, Gerald rarely finished a year of school completely. Gerald was mostly a loner, not really making friends until around junior high. Cruz was bullied, but more often than not, Gerald was the aggressor and was punished as so. So if somebody was bullying him in school, he would give it back to them. And so when adults would address that things that happened in school, it was usually, well, this child teased Gerald and Gerald beat him up.
Okay, so he's defending himself.
It's more of a, not so much defending, because like it would be say I came running up to you as a sixth grader and I'm like, Lavender, your name is stupid and you're me, and yada yada. And instead of you being like, no, you're stupid too, you just haul off and pop me in the face.
Okay. Okay.
So there he would initiate physical contact.
Okay.
Gerald Cruz's educational career will end in the 10th grade. As well, his socialization abilities were stunted due to his parents' antisocial behaviors and was completely forbidden to date. So you have Hortensia, who her extracurricular activities away from work consisted of smoking weed, drinking, and shacking up with whoever. It wasn't just men, it was whoever. And they didn't have any type of community. There was no church community. There was no school. There was no work. They went and did their tasks. They came home, they got blind drunk, and that was the end. That's all he grew up knowing. And I'm not sure why they're being forbidden to date.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
I mean, giving him an age limit, yeah.
I mean, maybe it's more of they were afraid that he was going to get close to somebody and tell somebody what was going on.
That makes absolute sense. Absolute sense.
They didn't want him to trust anybody. Is what it was.
Mm-mm. And he didn't. This magical belief that we talked about that his mother instilled in him went on. And as an adult, Gerald believed he was the reincarnation of a cult leader, Aleister Crowley. Please allow me to clear up a widespread belief that Crowley was evil. He wasn't evil. He was delusional. He practiced and created his own religion called Theilmo. And it was discovered, but not, it was weird how it was discovered. So Crowley said that there was an entity, a spirit that visited him and through him telepathically wrote a book and created this religion. And Crowley said that the spirit then dedicated the book to him and told him to take it to the world. So delusional, yeah. Ridiculous, yes. Evil,
No.
Jennifer, who is Cruz's common law wife, and two of their children were often on the receiving end of Gerald's rage, mimicking Hortensia's cruelty, solidifying that the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So, same thing. He beat his girlfriend. He beat his children. He tortured them. There was one incident that I found where he and another player in this game, David Beck, they tied his 2-year-old daughter to like a makeshift cross of wood, and then they hung her on the wall and then tied Gatorade bottles to her feet to pull her legs down.
And this was a baby?
2 years old.
Wow. Trying to make her taller?
I think they were just torturing her. It mimicked the Spanish Inquisition, the stretch where they would tie you to pulleys on either end and pull until they dislocated your appendages. So it'd be they dislocate your arms, dislocate your hips. And it was it's extremely painful. It's just torture. And then
So
the bad part about
They were mimicking medieval torture devices.
They're mimicking a lot of things, unfortunately. In 1989, Gerald moves his small family to a studio apartment on Finney Road in Salida, an empty lot commonly called at the time the camp. So, what this was is you have Finney Road, and then from stop sign to stop sign, we'll start with the stop sign on the south side. There was a laundromat, and then right across the street from the laundromat, there was just an open piece of dirt. There was no fence, no nothing, just an open piece of dirt that had four like duplexes, but there were four studio apartments way in the back.
Right.
Salida still to this day is an orchard type town. So the migrant field workers would come, they would stay in the studios, they would pick for that season, and then they'd move on. And they would just, the man who owned them, he would rent them to the migrant workers, and just take whatever he felt the rent was out of their wages and then give them the rest.
Okay.
So, and then right across from that was, and still is actually, is Salida Elementary School. But at this time in 89, it was a preschool to 8th grade. So it wasn't cut up like as a middle school and an elementary school. It was just one whole school.
Right.
So it was called the camp by everybody in town. As he collected his obedient crew to practice his cult-like beliefs, Gerald demonstrated he was a sadistic master manipulator. He preyed on vulnerable outcasts who had very little, if anyone, to depend on. He created a dysfunctional family that just a year later would kill for him. He did what every cult leader does, no matter what their cult, if it's a murderous, if it's a lucrative, whatever kind of cult it is, they pick on the most weak, vulnerable people. They either pick someone who is involved in drugs and supply them with drugs, or they get you addicted to the drugs and supply the drugs. So Gerald's second in command was a guy named James David Beck, but he'll just go by David. He grew up in Oakdale as well, but he grew up in a different part of Oakdale. Oakdale, like Salida, is an ag city, but and still to this day, is an ultra-conservative Christian-based community. So everything in Oakdale is ran on 3 key things: church, farming, and football. You don't play football, you don't farm, you don't support the church, you don't belong. His mother fit these guidelines perfectly. She was strict, but she was loving. His father, on the other hand, was remanded into the custody of the state mental hospital when David was 17 for molesting his 2 younger sisters. That, as fucked up as it is to young David's, mental health and self-esteem, it gets a little worse because his mother immediately divorces his dad. Good for you. Because if you'd support that son of a bitch, yeah. But kind of does the family dirty because she turns around and marries her now ex-husband's brother. So his uncle's now his stepdad.
Interesting. So he had an uncle dad.
Yeah.
I had an uncle dad once.
Yeah.
My dad dated my aunt for a short period of time, and we called them Uncle Dad and Aunt Mom, and they did not like it. And I was in high school, so all of my friends called them Uncle Dad and Aunt Mom, and they
That's awesome.
they broke up. So
Um, it was, yeah. Fuck you for doing weird family stuff, dude.
right? How dare you be Uncle Dad and Aunt Mom? Fucking weirdos.
Fucking weirdos. Um, Now, unlike Gerald, David and his family were regular attendees in church. And this continued through 1978 when David married a woman named Barbara. He sang in the choir and was described by many to be a faithful man of God. David's family testified that he was a good father and he was good to the other children in his family. And he was hard working, easygoing dude. But as we all know, and you and I, Lav, both know from personal experiences, one simple act can change your life and change it dramatically.
Yes, ma'am.
And for David, it was Barbara. She divorces him, and then he takes full custody of his 3 children. I could not find what had happened, why Barbara gave up custody of her children, because I don't know about in Maryland, but in California, that's not a common thing. Dads don't normally get sole custody of their children. California is a very female state.
I mean, I feel like across the board, that's how it is. Honestly, I feel like Maryland is pretty lenient towards men having more custody than other states that I've seen, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
men I've noticed have like 50% here, even though they don't utilize it or need it or deserve it. But I don't know if I know anyone that's in a situation where the ex man or husband or whatever in the relationship
Mm-hmm.
has more than 50%. I don't know if I know anyone in that situation.
I've never known anybody like that, so it's very rare, very rare. Somewhere between 1987 and 1989, Beck has what his very close friend in the church, they went to the Church of God in Oakdale, called a crisis of faith. So Lav, what is a crisis of faith?
So crisis of faith is it's generally somebody that was very religious and like in a specific religious path with like a specific religion, like Catholic or Christian or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be either of those two. I'm just throwing them out there. This is somebody that is die hard, whatever their religion is, and something happens to them and they all of a sudden are like, God has fucked me. I hate you and I hate the church. This was allowed to happen to me, and I want nothing to do with any of it anymore. And that is what a religious crisis is. And they completely go the opposite direction of whatever their religion was. And
Excellently put. And for Beck, it came at the end of his marriage, and consequently having to move back in with his parents.
that's a nightmare right there.
It can be. I know nowadays that's kind of the thing, because our economy is shit. So, people who've gotten out into the world and unfortunately have hit hard times have had to move back to their parents. So it's a little bit more of a common thing now in the 2024s, 2020s. But in the 80s and the 90s, you didn't do that. you moved out at like 18 and you stayed out because if you had to go home, you were fucking a loser. You were a loser and nobody wanted to deal with you. And that's too bad because it it doesn't really mean that at all. Unfortunately, people sometimes just they have a rock. They hit a rock, a rock bottom. It was also at this time that Beck began hanging out with Gerald Cruz, and almost instantaneously, Beck's personality changed. He went from church-going, upstanding father to showing no interest in things the Cruz was not a part of. At one point, under Gerald's command, David was only allowed to communicate when Gerald gave him permission. And that happens a lot in relationships, in marriage and stuff. Like, you'll have a one partner that's domineering, and they completely control the other one. And that's a horrible situation in a domestic relationship. But friends, you hang out with a friend and he's like, you don't get to talk to nobody right now. You need to just be quiet, sit in the corner. And you're a big dude and you go up and sit in the fucking corner because he told you to. Hell no. No. Even
I don't know if I've ever like seen that dynamic in friendships.
I have, unfortunately, I have.
I haven't.
And it's not pretty. It's not pretty at all. And they actually go through kind of the same mental crisis that abused spouses do. They become afraid that nobody wants to be their friend. And if they break away from this strong, basically alpha person, they're going to be alone. They're going to be lonely. They're going to be scared. They're going to be
Right.
outcast.
I mean, it makes sense.
And
I mean, the same mental stuff is happening, obviously.
yeah, it's and even at one point, Gerald commanded David to go to his family, go to his sister and her son, who was an infant, and tell them to give him money. And when they refused to give him money, he threatened to kill this infant. I'm not sure the age of the infant, but it's an infant, his nephew, and his sister, because she didn't have the amount of money he asked her for.
Wow.
Gerald's delusional lifestyle and way of thinking had David worshiping him as a satanic priest, and he believed that Cruz could cast spells. Cruz put Beck as his lieutenant in charge of discipline. And anyone Cruz told him, including, as we talked about, Gerald's infant daughter, or any of the other players that's going to come into this, if Cruz told him, go teach that guy a lesson. He disrespected me. Go teach him a lesson. There was something in his psyche that showed that he liked it, because after the event that we'll talk about, Beck went around telling people that they hung out with, and pretty much anybody that he would come across, like, hey, we slit some throats. And he would do it with a smirk on his face. Just out of the blue. Just out of the blue. The third in this is one that actually, it saddened me in the beginning until I got to understand who Richard Vieira came to be. And then I became more enraged. Barbara Vieira describes her little boy as quiet and always eager to help someone out. She stated, quote, he was never violent, but he was a poor student, end quote. This is due to him having a condition known as a lazy eye. Seriously, you guys, all a lazy eye is it's the muscle that's in the top part of the lid. It's not as strong as it needs to be. They can go in, they literally do a snip, they pull it together, and the eye is fine. It's just a droopy eye. That is nothing to do with intelligence. Nothing. Unfortunately, his father was a horrible role model. He introduced an 8-year-old Ricky to marijuana and alcohol at 8 years old. Ricky became very disappointed in high school because he didn't make the football team. But he drops out. He attends continuation school. And guys, for anybody that doesn't know a lot about continuation high school, it is the easiest thing you can do. You literally go to school for 4 hours. They give you packets to work on. You learn basically enough to get yourself into the world, and then they graduate you. You really don't even have to do much. And Ricky couldn't even stay in continuation. He couldn't even be successful in continuation school. He gets expelled for drug possession. And this was in his freshman year.
Wow.
And that was the end of his education.
He made it to be a freshman, though.
Vieira's sister Angela was a friend of Gerald's common law wife, Jennifer. And it's Angela that introduces Ricky to Gerald. Angela lived with and participated in Cruz's rituals. During an occult study session, Gerald tells Angela that, quote, sacrificing your newborn to Satan is the greatest achievement a person can receive. Now, Ricky was 15 years old, and he wanted to be independent of his parents. Angela takes and moves him into Cruz's Modesto house. But what was even worse about that is when Angela testified in court about the relationship between Gerald and Ricky had to ask Gerald for permission to do anything. He couldn't sleep if Gerald didn't tell him he could sleep. He didn't eat. He didn't go to the restroom. He didn't bathe. He didn't leave Gerald's sight unless he was given permission.
Wow.
He couldn't have contact with his family. A forensic psychiatrist who reviewed Vieira's actions before the murders was able to identify the process of mind control through the tattletale signs, including what we just said, sleep deprivation, isolation from the outside world, and regular mental and physical abuse, and at times, sexual humiliation. Gerald had a wheel, and it was called the wheel of punishment. And there were symbols on it, and each symbol was a different punishment. And they could range from something as simple as you have to sit on the floor to eat, or eat your food off the floor. You have to clean up after Gerald's family, or you could be beaten, sodomized, and humiliated in front of everybody, anybody. And Cruz would demand that his followers make a journal, and that they would journal in it every day. And inside, retired Deputy Randy Kearney discovered an instruction manual laying out all the ways Cruz and Beck tortured Vieira. He was electrocuted with exposed wires. They treated Ricky as their personal punching bag. Vieira became Gerald's slave. He owned him. And one of the journal entries Vieira even went on to write because Gerald had very limited physical abilities and was afflicted with a lot of ailments because Gerald was a 350-pound man. Cruz would sexually humiliate Ricky in front of the others. Another concerning part of Ricky's journals were filled with violent fantasies towards women. This is where I went from feeling sorry for him, as our friends at Spin and Sentence say all the time, you can feel bad for the child and not the adult. I wonder if Angela, looking at 21-year-old Ricky in court, who was facing the death penalty, ever wished she had never introduced him to Cruz.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
So 3 more players in this, not so much of the forefront like the others were, is we have Michelle Missy Evans, who she'll go by Missy from here out. She lived in Ripon and was literally hated by everybody in her neighborhood. She was a liar. She was violent. She was boastful. Missy's family, as well as another person who will come into play, Darlene Paris's parents, they were neighbors. And Ripon, having a very small community like Salida did, even though Evans was from Ripon, she lived with her grandma in Salida. So she went from one Ripon is a very Amish, German Baptist type community to where Salida, again, it's more, there's all kinds of everything that is there. Michelle became a permanent fixture at the camp even before the murders. After the murders, Missy bragged to anyone who listened about her part in the massacre and how she enjoyed watching one of the victims, especially as he died. But this was an impossibility due to Evans sitting in the car as the murders were happening on Elm Street.
Disgusting. Couldn't even participate and you want to play along like you did.
Oh, yeah. She boasted so much about everything she did. Then there's Jason LaMarche. Jason LaMarche was living with his mother, and he began dating Missy and became acquainted with Gerald and others through her. And by LaMarche's own account, quote, I was reckless, on drugs, really irresponsible. My self-esteem was so low. But here's this man and he accepts me. He desperately wanted the sense of belonging and to be accepted. He didn't have that at home because not very many people whose kids do drugs. He did drugs. So what do drug addicts do? They steal, they lie, they cheat.
True that.
And so the cult environment gave him exactly what he was looking for. And LaMarche was kind of an awkward guy. He was very tall. He was very lanky. And he had a white man's afro. And then last in this little crew of cult members is Ronald Willie.
Oh, God.
So Ron actually met Cruz and Beck at a trade school that everybody was trying to go to. And even though he lived away from the camp, Gerald still had control over him. He lived in a town 45 minutes, 30, 45 minutes away from Salida with his girlfriend. And if Cruz said jump, Willie jumped.
Even from that far away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll give you an example of it a little bit as we get into. There we have some of the Who. Here we go, though. This is the big Who. This is what's going to lead to Armageddon. In January of 1990, a force to be reckoned with arrives at the camp in the form of Franklin Reaper. Without permission, Franklin moved his trailer onto the open land in front of Gerald Cruz's place. Now, before I go on, that is the correct pronunciation of his last name. Can you imagine being in high school? Kid, man, maybe. High school and your last name is Raper.
Yeah, I mean, I knew some people in the military that had some really bad last names. I mean, there was a guy whose last name was Swallows. Could you imagine being Seaman Swallows in the military?
Franklin sold drugs and used drugs, causing constant traffic at all hours. Two main fixtures at Franklin's trailer were a chick named Little Debbie. So her name was Debbie Schmelzer. And then this dude called Fat Cat. But they were antagonists right along with Franklin. Now, let me interject this real quick. So everybody in Gerald's little crew did drugs. They drank. They didn't sell. Cruz sold. So what would be, in your opinion, the reason there would be conflict between Franklin and Gerald if they're both doing basically the same thing?
Because they're in the same jurisdiction. They're in the same cells area. That was the issue.
And Gerald couldn't control Franklin. He wasn't weak. So Gerald told him, you can't sell drugs here. You need to give me what you have. And Franklin, in so many words, told him to go fuck himself. What's that? I'm sorry.
But he regretted that decision.
Oh, yeah, he did. The first of three incidents that would bring hell to his door began with Franklin siphoning electricity from an elderly man that lived in one of the studio apartments at the camp, whose name was Jiggs. So he had his trailer hooked up to this guy's electricity. And when it came time to reimburse Jiggs for what he was using, he just refused. And Cruz goes out there and tells him, hey man, you can't do this to this old guy. It's not right.
Right.
And Franklin told him, I'm not paying him shit. And you can't make me. The second came when Cruz was coming up the driveway, who saw some children playing in the driveway in the general area of Franklin's trailer, and two of them being his own children.
Okay.
And when he walked up, he saw them sitting surrounded by discarded drug paraphernalia. There were needles, there were pipes, there were burnt spoons, there was residual whatever they had been taking everywhere. Wow. The third incident was an escalation in conflicts between Cruz and Franklin after Franklin's trailer was moved from the camp, and his car was then moved and set on fire. So Gerald gets his crew together and he tells them, I don't want this bastard here anymore. So they hooked up his trailer to David Beck's van, and they just drive it into the middle of town and drop it off. And then they push his car across the street to the laundromat. They bust the windows out. They urinate in it. They defecate in it. And then they set it on fire.
Wow.
You would think a smart person would not go back. Franklin kept going back to the camp, instigating violent and destructive encounters with everyone. He tore down a fence that separated Gerald's property from another property. There were physical altercations, threats back and forth. I mean, it was a giant violent pissing contest.
Wow.
Now, it's been mistakenly reported that Franklin owned the duplex at 5223 Elm Street, which in reality, Missy's sister, Tanya Miller, had been renting the duplex up until April of 1990, when she received a 30-day eviction notice. Franklin had never been given permission to take over the duplex, infesting the duplex like a cockroach.
Wow. Okay.
So he literally just, he didn't even pull his trailer up, nothing. He just got into this other guy that we'll talk about here very soon. His name is Dennis Caldwell. They get into his, POS car, and they just go over and start living at Tanya's duplex because Tanya had moved out and moved in with their grandma as well.
Hey, party people, EOW production crew here. Please tune in next week for the exciting conclusion of the Salida Massacre.